JG Francoeur, Jeff Booth. We're joined today. We're having a conversation with best-selling author Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow. And Jeff, you're going to be speaking at our upcoming Rethinking Real Estate Conference. We're excited to have you join us as a guest. And we want to give people some insights into who's Jeff, what are you all about? I mean, you're a best-selling author. Your book, by the way, is freaking amazing. And both JG and I have read it probably 1.5 or 2 times each. And it's both, but here, let me give a little bit of context for the book. And before we get started, and then I want to hear a little bit about your background, Jeff. You're talking about the future, what's happening economically. We look at some deflationary things that you see happening driven by technology. And of course, what's happening with debt and all those things. So it's a pretty big topic. But before we get there, that's a little bit of a seed plant, by the way. Did you see how I did that? Okay, so before we get there, though, Jeff, give us a little bit of your background, because what inspired you to write the book, and how did we get there?
I'm a technology entrepreneur. Started numerous technology companies. One that some in Canada might be aware of is Build Direct, and I grew that to $500 million in market cap over time. $120 million in sales. It was doubling every year in revenue. And then I tried to create a different company out of there. Got stuck in that company, but lots of other technology success and sitting at the front seat of technology for 20 years and watching how fast it's moving gave me an insight about 10 years ago that I could not understand, and that was, this technology is all around us. We use it, we vote for it every day with our personal use. Why aren't prices falling everywhere in the world? And this was, again, 10 years ago, and I couldn't square that peg. And so I researched, and the deeper down that I started to understand that problem, I wondered why nobody was connecting the dots to these two concepts. They're probably the biggest concepts in our world today, if you understand how fast technology is moving, and a system that can't allow that to happen and create broad-based abundance for everybody. And then I honestly, why I wrote the book was I got mad. I looked at my kids, and I saw the world in which they would grow up in would not be fair, and it wouldn't look like the world I grew up in. And I just kind of ran the scenarios out, thinking what that would look like, and realized I had to write the book. I did not want to write the book. It's not something that I'm an entrepreneur. I still sit on boards of, I think, 9 or 10 different companies, own quite a numerous companies in the technology space. I did not need to write a book. I had to write a book, is what it felt like. So.
What's interesting, Jeff, is I'm a self-declared fanboy a little bit. I got to tell you, I just want to openly admit this on camera. And the reason, I'll tell you the reason, is because when I picked up, and I think it was you, Patrick, that recommended the book to me, because we often recommend books back and forth. But when Patrick recommended this book, I think there's a lot of people in this world, and I'm one of them, where there's kind of there's something inside of you that says something's wrong, like it's not quite right. It doesn't feel right. There's something here that doesn't add up, and you can't quite put your finger on it, and you don't know the details, but you can just feel it. Like, we just can't keep going the way we're going forever here. Something has to change, and you're looking for explanations to that. When I read your book, it was kind of like 17 dominoes fell for me. And I was like, finally, this is what I'm looking for. This is part of what I'm looking for. So I understand why you wrote the book. Maybe give us a little bit about the book, just a short premise. If people are watching this and they're going to come to the Rethink Real Estate Conference, you're going to be the opening keynote speaker, which we're so excited about. Give us a little bit of premise. If someone doesn't have time to read your book before they get to the conference, give us the premise so that it totally makes sense for them.
Well, I cover quite a number of broad topics in the book, as you know, and I had to cover those broad topics in the book because this is such a complicated topic. And what we don't understand, probably the biggest thing we don't understand, is if you're living in the middle of a transition, and a system is changing and you're measuring the system from the system, it's really hard to see that transition. Our minds don't pick it up. And so you have to understand how how your natural reaction living through that system will fight that change too. And it's just the way our brains are wired. We don't see it. Otherwise, we would all predict what's happening in technology all the time. We would have seen the iPhone move really fast instead of holding onto our Blackberries. But the book is about these great forces that are influencing our lives. One force driven by the free market and entrepreneurs is driving prices down exponentially on a backbone of technology, or maybe not necessarily just driving prices down, giving you more for less. And that's why you use Google. That's why you use an iPhone with all the apps. That's why you use any technology you use. We vote for it every day with our time. And entrepreneurs, the tools that we're able to use today to give more value are staggering, and they're getting better and better all the time. And that would tend to mean, you would think, prices should be coming down everywhere. Mm-hmm. But that is bumping up into a world that we lived in all our lives. So did our parents, and so did their parents, that required inflation, that required, for that system to keep functioning, prices had to rise. And the why on that is, if prices fell, the debt couldn't be repaid. The debt would wipe out. It would just keep on cascading. And the debt is the system. Mm-hmm. So those two forces are fighting against each other, and technology isn't slowing down; it's speeding up. So you have an exponential trend that's trying to drive prices down, and the exponential trend that has to match it is monetization of debt, or essentially fake money, printing more and more money to make prices rise. And I would, every other thing that's talked about in the news, virtually every other thing is a derivative of that problem.
Mm-hmm. So it actually is exasperating the problem to begin with, and there's so much because that creates a lot of misunderstanding with the general public and with what they see and what they want from politicians. So it really does it is a messed up system when you start to dig into it. But when you have these conversations, Jeff, and I know that they're kind of going against the grain of what people believe and probably what people want to hear, but it's not that you're incredibly pessimistic about the future. You see an optimism you have an optimism about the future, but it is really as us, especially as investors, and expanding what we do and how we invest our capital, how we look into the future has to be kind of a risk mitigation side of things. We have to step into what's coming because, JG, the Real Estate Investment Network, almost 30 years later, we're always having the conversation about it's not about what's happening today. We have to be able to look into the future to decide and make decisions about what we're going to do, how we're going to invest our capital, where we're going to take maybe capital off the table, whatever the investment scenarios we create. So is it fair to say that you're still optimistic about the future, but we have to change how we view the future? Is that a fair statement?
I'm really optimistic about the future, but it's a transition that changes the wiring on just about everything we think of, and as a result of it, also changes where you would put money to protect that money from what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. It has to, in a transition that's as big. Now, this transition hasn't happened to money before, so it's hard to see. And we live in a system that is controlled. Essentially, money is just an abstract concept of our time. Mm-hmm. And once that's manipulated or changed, if new rules come in for money, that's a big deal for every other asset class, for every other thing we're talking about. But this is normal for technology. What happened to Blockbuster when download speeds went faster, right? And Blockbuster added candy aisles to their stores to try to protect their old business. So this is a normal thing in kind of industry writ large. Same thing with BlackBerry and iPhone that I talked about before. Technology changes the rules and by changing the rules, it gives a whole bunch of people something they didn't have before, and they don't see it before that change. And once they see it, they can't imagine their lives without it. And that's actually what's happening today. And it's happening today with people, you could say, in Bitcoin who understand what's happening with Bitcoin. And once they see it, they can't understand why other people can't see it, and it changes their lives. And other people that are fighting it with the old system, it's exactly the same thing.
And you also, once you see it, you can't unsee it, if you know what I mean. It's very difficult to get, to unsee. And actually, that is the purpose. That is the ethos of this conference, Rethink Real Estate, because real estate is one of the most ancient, old money systems that we have in around the world. I mean, it's so much is based on real estate and where real estate is going and where real estate has been. And we see a future where things are going to change in a very big way, a lot because of technology, whether it's self-driving cars or transportation as a service or electrification. And we've been talking about this now for 12 months. And now we're bringing in the component of the financial system. We're bringing it in and we're talking about things like Bitcoin, and we're talking about decentralized finance and the effects this can have on the real estate space. And our thing, Jeff, and I'd love to get your take on this, is, you may not be all in on Bitcoin or any one of these things I talked about, but you have to start looking into it, and you have to be open to the possibilities, even if you're not all in on it, even if you don't understand it, got it, but you have to at least open the door to this stuff, because if you start chasing these future concepts, you will always be behind the eight ball. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and one of the things, and this, I wrote about it in the book, but strong opinions weakly held. And what that means is I have a strong belief in something, but I'm always willing to challenge that conviction with learning. If something changes that view, then I will change that. If something is absolutely changes that view and I was wrong, then I admit it really quickly I was wrong and move forward with new information. And that's how we learn everything. And so the best at that in a world that's moving really fast with technology, how fast it's moving, it's literally exponential, and our brains can't comprehend the exponential. What that means is we are likely wrong about a whole bunch of things. And so the curiosity in what you just said, and to constantly challenge that from a first principles basis, is so paramount. Otherwise, you're caught on the wrong side of where the world's going. You could look at my book, and a lot of people said this. And once you understand what's happening in the world from this lens, investment decisions are really easy. Like what my portfolio has looked like over the last 3-5 years is staggering, because investment decisions are really easy if you understand what the macro trends across the world have to be as the system changes from one system to another.
It's interesting around, what JG says, you start looking at this, you can't look at it anyway. You start going down certain rabbit holes. It always reminds me of, my mom taught me as a kid, don't pull the thread on that sweater, bring it to me and I'll get it handled. Like, you start pulling that thread and it all starts to unravel, right? So here's the fundamental around that. And then you use the quote, we don't know this, you don't know the snowflake, and I'm paraphrasing, you don't know the snowflake that caused the avalanche, right? And as we start to see things unfold, people are always asking, when is this going to happen? But the reality is, and I'll use Mark Moss's quote, which is, we're in it. It's happening. People have this expectation that it's going to be the switch that gets flipped, and they just want to be ready for when the switch gets flipped. And the reality of it is it's happening right now. We have to see it, and we have to start moving with it to get in front of it, try and get in front of it and stay in front of it. And to your point, we don't know. It's hard to. We have to stay open. First principles thinking. We have to stay open to the possibilities. And I use the phrase, possibilities and probabilities. There's never absolutes, especially with what's going on in the world today. And so when we look into the future, we have to really be paying attention today. That's the thing about it. We have to look at what's happening today and then extrapolate into the future. And that's certainly one of the things that your book brings up. And at the conference, when we're talking about rethinking real estate, it's not just about real estate. It's about the technology behind the scenes. It's about other investment opportunities and options that you believe in strongly. And the one question I want to give you a direct question, Jeff, which is, most people think that 5G is just going to be faster internet speeds and, better usage of your phone. We look at it and we look at what that actually opens up the door to of technology. And even in Canada, I mean, it's a global phenomena, but even in Canada, it's billions of dollars have been invested in 5G. And so when you look at 5G in terms of technology, do you think that's really a big incremental step in how it will drive technology going forward?
You're looking at one of them, but it is one of them.
Yeah.
And all of these combined, all of these, whether it's additive manufacturing, 3D printing, whether it's self-driving cars, whether it's like these changes are built on top of other huge changes. Mm-hmm. And as they speed up, everything changes. And that's actually what you just said is critical. What people look at, what people would look at when this came out, or the BlackBerry in the first place. My phone's perfect. I use it and then this isn't just a phone. It's everything. It's your AI assistant. It's your maps. It's the world. And so we tend to measure technology narrowly, and we look at the new version or something as a replacement of the old, of narrow, right? And that's not what happens. It changes everything. And so it's all the cascading effects of that change. And then the actions that you take on that cascading effect that change the world. It's actually why I can be both massively optimistic on where we're going, because it's an incredible transition. And what it means is actually we would work way less and get way more. What it actually means if you had a system that would allow that to happen.
That's what everybody's investing for. So that's why they do it.
But we have a system wired the other way. And when you have the system wired the other way, listen, we just had a 7% inflation rate. And if you measure that same inflation rate in $81, the same measurement system in 81, that would have been almost a 15% inflation rate. Why houses have gone up that much in Canada, real estate's gone up that much in Canada, is because you have inflation driving that. And so people think I'm safe. But when you do that, that's also essentially a 15% picking of the pocket of the middle class and poor. Mm-hmm. Because their rents just went up, their food costs just went up, their gas prices just went up, and they can't make ends meet anymore. And so what they do is they go and elect governments to give them more of the money to create that, to make that happen. And you start concentrating all control in government. As you do that, you make the system worse and worse and worse. And it starts, because the only way out is there's too much debt, and I have to make the debt cheaper in real terms. So I keep on printing money and I make it worse. And people kind of move into abject poverty, and they get pissed off. In Monopoly, they kick over the game board. When the game board is a real game board and they can't get out of the system, and there's no way to get around the game board, they rise up and they take back what was so if you look at cities around the US right now, if you look at all around the globe right now, you have populations rising against the system. And you cannot build walls high enough to protect the haves from the have-nots as this starts to escalate. And even when you look at real estate, it becomes less safe in an environment that looks like that. And the environment over time has to look like that from the existing system.
It's
fascinating.
$9 trillion, by the way. I just had to put it out there. 9 trillion is Canada's latest debt number. So it's like,
yeah. How do you pay that back with an actual economy? This is all just the reason why real estate is going up is it's a somewhat of a store of value against this, or it has always been looked like as a store of value against this, and that could continue on for for a bunch of time, but it doesn't end well.
Mm.
And once that store of value is tied to land in a system that doesn't end well, it still doesn't end well.
Yeah.
You can get it out. You can't move it.
Patrick, Jeff, the objective here was to let people know that we are so thankful that you're going to join us at Rethink Real Estate Conference, Jeff. You know, I gotta give you big props because you said it really well. You didn't need to write this book, but you had to write the book, and you've been incredibly gracious with your time, not only with us, but I see all the podcasts you do, all the shows you do. And I know that you don't have to do this. It's not your job. You're not a podcaster. You're running businesses here. So thank you so much for your time today, folks. Jeff's going to be opening the conference, the Rethink Real Estate Conference. And if you thought today's conversation was quite fascinating, wait till you get to the conference, because we're going to be opening some of these doors. In fact, I'm going to say we're going to kick some of these doors down. And for some, we're going to definitely open up some questions. For others, we're going to answer some questions. Well, one thing is for sure, it's going to be fun, exciting, and we're definitely moving down the path of rethinking real estate. So folks, get registered. The event is January 22nd. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. And Patrick, thanks for hosting this.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.